else to determine.
Thank you.
So Mackenzie's spoken against the bill. Would anyone spoken against the override? Would anyone like to speak for the override? Would anyone like to speak against the override? You're recognized to speak against the override.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's more on the override, not technically against the override. This bill, when you look through this bill, if you go to that same third page that I was at a while ago in my presentation, it references 2 federal codes. One of those federal codes collects the taxes for game and fish. That's about $17.9 million a year. That's 20% of the game and fish budget that would have to be laid off. That's huge. 20% is a big deal. The other code in there refers to 921 et al., which means it goes up from there. So it takes in 922 and on. There's about 800 potential cases in the works right now for prosecution that now state and local law enforcement officers can't participate in testifying. They can't participate in evidence. Those people potentially go free. Those are sex abuse cases. Those are drug cases. Those are all kinds of major cases. And when I got elected, I was elected to be strong on crime, not weak. And strong on crime means that we lock up the people that violate our youth, that violate other everyday citizens in this state. And that is something to potentially think about. You go on down in the bill, you get to page 4 and 5, and it's got fines in there for law enforcement. You think, oh, okay, fines, not a big deal. Well, qualified immunity for those undercover officers and officers in themselves all go away when they're a criminal. A fine is a criminal act. So you just did away with qualified immunity right there. You go on down to the next section, and you put everybody, a supervised officer and elected official, in a misdemeanor. Not just your elected officials like we did in the bill previous. You go on down a little bit further, and there's only about 7 or 8, 10 rights that are listed, enumerated in the bill for the back section. So we're saying those rights are more important than the other ones? I mean, all rights are important, and they all should be listed, and they wasn't. So this bill was thrown together, and it wasn't done in mindful of making sure that we could run state government every day, to make sure that the things that I enjoy, the one thing I do and live for and work for is so I can be a sportsman, so I can crawl around in the woods. If the game and fish loses 20% of their budget, all that public land that I hunt on, it may not be open anymore because there may not be an officer to oversee it. So I think you really got to think long and hard. And the reason you just got to vote on a bill is so you could tell all your constituents, we took care of all that federal overreach. We took care of all those concerns that they fed us over the last 8 months. We were able to do that. So if you want to vote for the override because you had 1,000 emails and 100 texts, that's fine, do it. But you ought to think long and hard about all those consequences I just listed out for you. And you've got a bill that we're going to send to the Senate, or already sent to the Senate, that addresses all those concerns. We should have looked at this bill a little stronger. It should have been some opposition in committee. And I think there were some promises made on some amendments that never happened. I don't know if the promises were broken. I don't know what happened. But there were some amendments that were proposed, and folks felt good about it. And they didn't come testify against it in committee because they thought the amendments were going to take place. They didn't. And here we are. So I just think you got to think long and hard, and you got to be able to face your constituents. And that's what we get paid to do, by the way, is to tell our constituents exactly what's going on in this chamber and tell them exactly why and how we took a vote. And we're supposed to take their accounts in favor. We're supposed to vote the way they tell us. Well, that's the reason we stayed all night up here last night working on a bill that we could take care of all the concerns they wanted without defunding the game and fish, because that's what you're doing. You're defunding game and fish, without letting go 800 criminals or 800 cases worth of criminals. We're supposed to do the right thing. This is not the right thing. And if it gets me beat next year in an election, that's fine. I'd appreciate a no vote.
Representative